All right, really quickly, guys, I am gonna upload a. Well, I'm just gonna do it really quick just to show you. So I went online and I just was looking for a big piece of fabric. So this is just a canvas texture. So to see how I actually do things like this, if I'm going to search for something, I will go in and I will do a search for fabric or canvas. That's what the search that I did was for canvas. And it'll come up, it'll give you some, white canvas or something in here. If you go up to the very top, well, here, let's just do it from the beginning. So Google search for canvas. And when you get that way, you want to actually change this to images. So come over and click on images, because what I'm looking for is stock that I can use for texture. That's what this is all basically about. So I'll just do images like this, but you need really high res stuff in this, because if you blow your texture up, it no longer really looks like what I think you're looking for. It's not going to look like a true canvas texture. So you come over to your tools palette all the way here on the far side over here, and you can pick size, and you want to pick large, and that will restrict most of what you get to being large size pieces of canvas. Then you can also go through this top sort of area up in here to pick different sort of to run different filters on this. So for instance, you can look at this one called texture, or this one looking called background. I'm going to click on the one called background and just sort of see what I get in here, and I hover over something. Again, I'm looking for a really high res image of this stuff. So if I click on this and then hover over this part, you can see my resolution is only 6 by 400 pixels. That's not big enough. If I go to this one that's right next to it, this is actually a little bit bigger. It's 7 by 12. If I go to this one right here, again, pretty small. So I can come down through other of these and look at other things like here. Like this one is kind of interesting to me. Again, it's a really small file, so that's not going to help me. I'm going to look at this one again. I don't feel like after I put this filter on here that the tools is respecting that. So I'm going to go to tools again, size, and go to large again. And then as I start to go through these again, hopefully I'll find something like this is a really big file. This is almost 2,000 pixels by 2,000 pixels. So to actually then get this file, you want to hold down your control key, or if you're on Windows, right mouse click and click on this, and you want to open this image in a new tab. It's a lot easier than going to the website that's housing this. So you'll get a new tab and you can look at it. And you can see that this is now a giant version of this image. So I'm going to copy this image now. Again, right click or control click on a Mac, or right mouse on a Windows. Click on this and say you want to copy this image, and then go into Photoshop. I'm going to close this one up because I don't need it, because I like the other one better. And then just Command N just to make a new file. It will load the pixel dimensions of the thing that's on your clipboard if you have clipboard selected. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that, and then paste. So now I've got a texture that I can actually work with. So I'm going to then open up this other image, just so that you can sort of see what it looks like when you apply the texture. I'm going to grab this texture and drag it over here on top of my file. Hold down my shift key so it brings it in. Again, in a perfect world, I would have it considerably larger. We can tile this if we wanted to, so we could actually make this. What I mean by that is I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and then we can Command J it and do one right next to it, and Command J it again, and do another one right next to it, and Command J again, and do another one next to this, and that one needs to move down a little bit, sorry, and then Command J again, and finally one last one. So then I am going to do a merge stamp version of all of these. So I'm going to turn off my bottom layer, go to the very top, Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E will give me a version of it all. Now it's completely covered, so I can get rid of all the ones that are in the middle, including that one. So now I've basically got a big hunk of canvas that's sitting on top of my image. So then the trick is you just change the blending mode of this to either to any of the contrast groups. Overlay would be one, soft light would actually be another. So I'm going to pick soft light. It seems to be a little bit less destructive. But if you come in now and take a look at this, you can see it's applied the texture literally to this image. So if you feel like this is too strong, you can always drop the opacity of this so that it's much, much more subtle. The other thing that you can do is if you feel like it's not pronounced enough, if you take a look at this image by itself, you can see it's made of highlights and shadows. You can make these more extreme or less extreme by just putting a curve on this. So I'm going to add a curve above this. I'm going to clip the curve to this image so that that's the only thing that gets affected. So again, hovering between the two layers, holding down my Option key, clip it. So now when I actually make the curve more extreme, that's only affecting the texture layer. It's not affecting anything else. And so you can play all sorts of games with this. So you can see we're making it lighter, it's a little less, but anyway, it's just a way to create texture in something. And so it just going back to what you were doing in your adding texture things, it's a great way to actually play those games. But the other thing that you did that I thought was really smart is, again, if you copy your layer again and bring it up on top of everybody, so that's what I'm going to do. Command J and just bring this up on top of everybody. Up in here, you can do the same thing with this. You can actually use blending modes to restore, to use it as your texture layer as well. So I can come down here to do a soft light on top of this, and you'll actually see the difference that it ends up making. You sort of start to bring some stuff back into it. We'll come into here a little bit more. So this is what it looks like just plain, and then this is what it looks like with it a contrast run on it. But then this is what happens when I've actually brought back in my original layer up on top of all of this. So you can do layer after layer after layer, and then you can come in with layer masks on these things and control where this really happens. So let's say you don't want this to happen, you know, in her hair or whatever, just add a layer mask and then paint it out. Make sense? So it just opens up the whole world of textures to you to be able to do anything. Okay, there's an image that I want you guys to open up. There's a few things that we've missed over the course of our classes, and I want to, yes?
Sorry, you said you could add like the original picture on top of the texture,
Yeah.
and then that would add the texture back onto everything.
So when you do it, though, you can't use a normal blending mode because it'll just wipe it out. You have to use, so bring your image up on the top again to pull it back, but again, with some sort of blending mode. Usually overlay, and the four that most people use are multiply and screen, or overlay and soft light. Those are the ones that'll blend it in, so that, because otherwise, if it just stays normal, then you just put a copy of your image on the very top and you don't see any of the work that you've done. Yeah, okay. Okay, so the image that I want everybody to find really quickly, let me find it first. Yeah. The image that I want everybody, so if you go to your session number 10, inside number 10, there is a copy of the Skin Eyes Retouch. It's called version 3. This may be one of mine, I don't know. But anyway, that's the one I want everybody to find. So can you guys find that one? And go ahead and open that into Photoshop. So we'll do a couple of things on this really quickly. So Kiara, I think you were looking to knock shine down on your images. So we'll start with that. what you can do to actually knock the shine, because you can see there's a fairly good shine that's happening right underneath here. If you wanted to bring this down, this is how I would do it. So if you guys will do this with me, we are going to split this, so to do frequency separation to actually fix the shine on this part. So again, you make 2 copies of your background layer, Command J, click on the one that's in the middle and rename it low. Click on the one that's on the top and rename it high. Turn high off. Select the low layer and then zoom into this image. So we need to zoom in to really see some texture in here so that we know when we're actually getting rid of the texture. I'm going to look at all the pores right here. That's skin texture to me. That's detail in there. So that's what I'm going to blur this to the point that I don't see those pores over skin anymore. So on the low layer with it selected, up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and I'm going to zip it back to a 1, and I can still see the pores at 1. So I'm going to hit my backspace key or my delete key and type in a 2. I can still see them at 2. Again, delete, 3. At 3, I've pretty much lost them. They're pretty much gone. I'm going to see what 4 looks like, just for the heck of it. And 4 doesn't actually look too bad on this. So that's what I'm going to go with. You can do stuff in between. You can do like 3.5. You can do all those kinds of things. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and pick 4 for mine if you want the same. And I'm, yeah, no, what?
Split frequency. Do you? I've been doing the high layer first, like doing the high pass.
So it's in, yeah, no, we'll do the high pass one right now because it's good for everybody to see that one again. A lot of times when I'm struggling with and trying to find out where I split, I will go to the high pass and I'll do them both. I'll say, so, okay, I've done this. 3 was pretty good. 4 was, I'm torn between those 2. So then if we do the high pass version of it, if you guys want to do this with me, go ahead and select the high layer, turn it on so it is visible, and then you're going to come up to the filter menu, down to other, down to high pass. So filter menu, other, high pass. In the high pass part, you would start this again down at 1. So I'm going to type in a 1. And now what we're looking for is just the opposite. We're looking to get the detail to come in. So this is, we're doing the exact opposite approach. Instead of blurring the low layer to get rid of the detail, we're now trying to establish what detail we want in the high layer. So I've got a radius of 1. You can see you get a few little highlights on her lips, but this is clearly not enough. So delete key and then type in a 2, and you can see I'm starting to bring back the sort of like the little pores that are on the underneath her nose. I'm going to hit the delete key and go to 3. They're much stronger here at 3. And then finally I'm going to do the same thing and hit 4. And at 4, what begins to happen, and this is again just the thing that we don't want to be returning to this layer, is color or tone. Again, we're trying to split color and tone into the low layer and only have detail in the high layer. If you take your radius up, really hit it up hard, hit it like to a 10, you'll actually see we're starting to pull color into this image. She's got color in her lips now. She actually has some color in her skin. That tells me, so now if we did the split here at this point, we would actually have a lot of tone and we would have all the detail and the texture, but we'd also have a lot of tone and color in this, which would make the split much less effective. So I'm going to go back to, in this case, looking at it, I feel like that the 3 was probably the better call here. So I'm going to set it at 1, 2, 3. I feel like I'm getting all the detail down here pretty well underneath her nose. So I am going to go ahead and say okay to 3. We'll go ahead and finish doing the split using this high pass method. So I'm going to say okay to this. Your very next move, and you have to do this move like right away. You can't do something else. This is something, you don't want to change blending modes or do anything else yet. The next move that you make on this is you come over to your image menu, down to adjustments and to brightness and contrast. So again, you've done the high pass filter on this. We've gotten just the detail and texture that's in her skin. I'm coming over to the image, down to adjustments, to brightness and contrast. And when this dialog opens up, before you do anything, you have to hit this use legacy. If you don't, and you actually hit, you make the change that we're going to make a change in contrast using this dialog box. But here, watch what happens. So I'm going to actually hit use. No, I'm not going to use legacy. I'm just going to make the change first. So I'm going to drag the contrast down to a negative 50. And that's always the value you use on this. And then click on use contrast, and you see it zeroes your contrast adjustment out. So that's why I always say click on this first and then drag this thing down to a -50 and say okay. And then finally, we have to remember exactly the value we used in that high pass, the radius of the high pass. Ours was a 3. So we're going to go back down to our low layer now, and we are going to do a Gaussian blur on the low layer. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and you need to type in exactly the value you used for your high pass filter, and that was a radius of 3 pixels, and say okay. And then finally, we need to change this high layer. We need to change the blending mode from normal down to linear light. And then again, we're going to put both of these into a group. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and click low, because I want to put high and low into its own frequency separation group. Come up to the menu at the little hamburger thing at the very top, the top of the layers palette, all the way to the right. Click on this and do new group from layers. And I always just label mine FS for frequency separation. And then turn this thing on and off. And if you see a shift, then you didn't do it right. If you don't see a shift, it's correct. There is no shift in that. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to do my protective layers here. So I'm going to click on my low layer and just hit Command J. So I have a low copy to do my work on. And then on the high one, I'm going to do the same thing, Command J. But you'll notice when I do that, this image gets really contrasty. So this is in large measure working very similar to doing, making a copy of my image and putting it up on the very top and setting the blending mode to either an overlay or a soft light layer, whatever. The image itself is actually creating more texture in this. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm doubling up on this blending mode. And so to avoid that, I'm going to hover between high copy and high, hold down my option key and click, which clips high copy down to high. And then I'm going to change the blending mode of my high copy back to normal. So through all of that madness, we actually now have a high copy that we can do our high frequency work on, and a low copy that we can do our low frequency work on. I am going to go to my tablet right now. If you've got yours, go ahead and grab it. If you don't, you can still do this with a mouse. We're just practicing this stuff right now. But I'll show you, Kiara and also Ali, exactly what I was talking about the resampling part. So for me, again, I typically turn off the layer that I'm not working on. So I'm only going to be working on this low copy layer. So I hover over the eyeball, hold down the option key and click, and it turns everybody else off. And then I'm going to look, and let's say I want to knock down the sheen that's actually on her face right here. So the highlight that's at the ball of her chin, I want to bring that part down. So to do that, again, I'm not going to use a mixer brush. I'm just going to use a regular brush, hit the B key to get it. Make sure that you've actually selected low copy so that you're actually working on that layer. Check the edge of your brush. You want a completely soft brush on this. You do want a normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and then you want to bring your flow way down. I'm going to bring my flow down to probably like a 2 or a 3, somewhere in there. And then I want to sample the area that's right around here to actually darken the sheen that's on her face. So I'm going to hold down my option key and click, and you'll see it samples the color right underneath where I am right now. And I'm just going to start scrubbing around in here. Stop at that point, come over to another area even lower down here, hold down your option key, sample another color so we can start mixing stuff in. I think that flow of 3 is too much. I'm going to bring it all the way down to a 1. And then again, I'm just going to sample color from all around here and just start working this way in. Sample, sample. flow of 1 is a little bit slow for me, so I'm going to pop it up to a 2 or back up to a 3. We'll see what happens. That 3 is still pretty aggressive, but you can see I'm mixing a lot of different, again, the skin tones are very, very similar to one another, and then I'm going to try to soften this line up just a little bit. And then we can see what it looks like. So I'm going to turn my high copies back on. And then this is my frequency separation. Oops. Turn on your very bottom layer so that you can do a before and after. And that's what I've done. Works like a charm. Right? That work for you? Yeah, all right. So as long as we've got this open, we need to talk about sharpening, especially when you're talking about sharpening beauty. So one of the things that always surprises me is that people will go to, well, let's not do sharpening first. Let's do contrast first. So I've actually knocked down, you can see here, it pulled all the way back. I've taken off part of the shine that's on the lower part of her. Again, this is what my frequency separation looks like. However, now I want to actually accentuate the natural highlights and shadows of her. So basically we're talking about building contrast into her. The problem that most people have when they do contrast, so I'm going to go up on the very top of my frequency separation layer, and I'm going to simply add a curve on top of this. And I'm going to pull the shadows down, so I'm just clicking in roughly the shadow area. Look at my screen to see roughly where I'm at. I'm going to pull my shadows down, and then I'm going to grab my highlights and push them up. And you can see when I do this that it actually does build in considerable contrast, but it also boosts the saturation, and it also changes the color of the image. All of that's happening. Now, I can mitigate that somewhat by changing the blending mode of this from normal down to luminosity. So this makes things a little bit better, but the problem that I have in doing it this way is that it's building contrast across the entire image, across the entire tonal range of the image, and it's doing it evenly across the entire tonal range of the image. And that's not necessarily what I want to actually have happen in this. So I'm going to show you guys a different way that I do contrast. And this is how I do contrast for everything. I don't do contrast. I don't do curves like this. I don't think they actually, I just think they're too heavy-handed, to be perfectly honest with you. To see what I'm talking about, we'll actually do a history snapshot of this. So I'm going to come over and just hit my history and do a snapshot of that. And then I'm going to go all the way up to the top and double click on snapshot 1, and I'm going to do a curve contrast. And then I'm going to go all the way back down and select my very last layer on this. And then I'm going to turn this actually off so that I don't have this. My curve was inside my frequency separation group. I just pulled it to the outside. It's no different. So anyway, so this is how I do it now, or how I've actually done it. Right now, I'm actually going to throw this curve away. We've got a snapshot of it, so I can always go back to it. I'm going to throw this one away because right now, in order to do what I want to do, I need a combination of this. So right now, I have got some of my image that's in the frequency separation group and some of it that's down at the bottom. I need those together in one single layer. So again, I'm going to do a merge stamp visible of this. So make sure that you've got the top frequency group selected, and then Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. It will make a new version of the file of everything that's visible up on the very top. And then we're going to load, I'm going to actually load the green channel. Some people will load the luminosity channel. Some people will load the red channel. I always find that the green channel is the best one for this. So I want you to come over to the green channel, hover over, you don't need to select it, but hover your cursor over the thumbnail of the green, hold down the Command key and click, and it will load that as a selection. And you can see I've got marching ants on my figure. Then I'm going to come back over to my layer, this layer number 1, the combination of everything, and I'm just going to Command J this. So hit Command J. And if you hold down your Option key and click on the eyeball for this new layer, what you'll see is it's basically selected the highlights of your image. So if you zoom in here and take a look at this, you can actually see the areas that are, well, for instance, if you look at the sweat, at her blouse, it's fully selected here. If you actually look at the areas like her nostril inside her mouth, those areas are not selected. If you actually look at her eyeballs, there's a lot of transparency in there. They're not very well selected. So basically, this is the highlights of my image, and I'm going to double click on it and rename it that. I'm going to just call it highlights and say OK. Then I'm going to turn this off temporarily and turn on my composite #1, my merge stamp version of this. So now I've got the highlights, but I want to select the shadows now. Any ideas how to select the shadows? Well, wouldn't the shadows be the inverse of the highlights? Sure they would. So let's go back to the green, hover over the green thumbnail, hold down the Command key and click. I've loaded the highlights again. But now, before I use to jump it a selection out of here, I'm going to invert the selection. So up to the select menu, down to inverse. And now I've selected the shadows. And now back over on my composite image, hit Command J again. And now hold down your Option key and click on that eyeball. This is now the shadows. And if you take a look, you can see the shirt's not selected here at all. The shadow areas in the shirt are selected. Also, the irises of her eyes are more selected. So are her eyebrows, and so her eyelashes. All of these are stronger in here. So I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to call this shadows. So then we are going to put these two together into a group. So I'm going to, shadows is selected right now. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click highlights. And I'm going to add, click on my little flyout menu on the top right hand side and say new group from layers. And I'm going to call this contrast. And say OK to that. Then you need to open up the contrast group. You need to make sure that everybody is turned on, as well as your base layer, the layer that we're actually working on. I want you to select your shadow layer right now, and we're going to change the blending mode of this shadows layer. So I've got shadows in my contrast group is selected. I'm going to come up to the blending mode menu. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to change this to multiply. And you can see it makes all of those shadows darker. All of the shadows on her face just got darker. All of this stuff just built up more density in here. So I've made my darker areas darker. And now I'm going to do the same thing for the highlights, but I'm going to make them lighter. So click on your highlights layer right now, and you're going to change the blending mode of that to the opposite of multiply, which is screen. So now this group right here is now making my highlights lighter and my shadows darker. And if you turn this on and off, you can see it's picked up a serious amount of contrast in here. I personally think it's a little too aggressive, so I'm not going to keep this. Now, there's no rule in this, but I do this all the time, and what I have found, at least is a starting point that I'm going to suggest to you, is you want the strength of this to be twice as strong in the highlights as it is in the shadows. So we need to, the shadows, both of these right now are at 100%. It's opacity is what controls their strength. I'm going to suggest, again, sometimes this doesn't work, but it is a general rule it does. Select the shadows layer again and change the opacity from 100% down to 50%. And so what I've done now by doing that is I've cut the shadows, the impact that I'm having on my shadows, in half, but I haven't touched my highlights. So the highlight correction in this contrast group is double what the shadow correction in here is. So this is where I'm at right now. However, I think the reason I put this into a group is that the group now, I can control the opacity of the group together. So instead of having to go in and individually change the opacity of the highlights and then the opacity of the shadows, I can keep that 1:2 ratio going and just use the opacity of the group as like a master control of my contrast. So I'm just going to grab the opacity of the group and start to pull it down till I get something that I feel like I like better in terms of the contrast. And so for me, I'm around a 39-40%, somewhere in there. That's what is working for me right now. And I'm going to do a snapshot of that. So again, over to the history panel, the little camera at the very bottom, click on it to create a snapshot of this. And I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to rename this contrast luminosity. And then you can go back and forth between the two. Just click on the curve and then click on this. And then back on the curve and click on this. And you can see it's a much sort of gentler way to actually do this. And it works brilliantly because what I'm doing is I'm basing this actually on the highlights and the shadows of the image. I actually am copying that content to its own layers. And then using blending modes to make things lighter and to also make things darker, respectively, and then putting those two together to actually achieve this. And for me, this is the far superior way to actually do contrast. Are there questions about any of this? Okay, so then how do we sharpen this thing? That's the next thing. So you've gone to all this trouble. You've spent your day after day working on tonal retouching to get this smoothed out, or you spent 3 or 4 hours doing this in frequency separation. But now it comes time to actually sharpen the image. And most people just like sharpen the shit out of it and move on. Well, we've gone to all of this effort to smooth this skin out, and then when you sharpen it, you turn right around and you hit it back again. And so those are contradictory things for me. So I don't want to actually sharpen. I don't want to sharpen her skin at all. I want to sharpen everything else except for her skin. So to do that, again, I've got my contrast group going on right now. If you're happy with where the contrast is right now, we need to do yet another merge stamp version of this because I need to have a layer that I can do my sharpening on. So again, but the contrast has to be built into it. So on top of my contrast group, I'm going to again do Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. It puts up another layer on the very top, and this is now got, again, I'm baking all of my stuff into these images. I'm fine with doing that later on. I've got my original version sitting right down here at the bottom. If I ever needed to return to that, I can certainly do it. So there's no harm in baking this stuff in. If you don't like it later on, you can simply throw it away. So, but anyway, that's how I'm gonna work with this. So in order to actually make this sharpen everything except for her skin, I need to select her skin. So to do that, with this new layer on the very top, I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to call it sharpening. Wow, I really misspelled that one. And I'm going to convert this to a smart object. I just inadvertently tore my layers palette off, so I'm just going to come up to my window, down to workspace, and reset it. And I'm back to where I was. I'm going to make this a smart object because everything that I'm going to do on this, the smart object allows me to change the strength of the sharpening after the fact. So up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. This is now a smart object, and I am going to actually run sharpening on this. But first, I'm going to build a layer mask for this that protects the skin so that you don't sharpen the skin, but does sharpen everything else. So to do that, up to the select menu, down to color range. Now in color range, there's a drop-down menu here called skin tones. It never works. I'm going to click on skin tones, and this is what it gives me. I've got a background right here that's actually showing. I've got some parts of her blouse or showing all of her hair has been selected in here. So I don't actually use this. I don't think it works really that well. Instead, I'm going to go back up to sampled colors. When I do that, the image is actually turned black right now. If you want your image, you guys might still be seeing your image. So I'm going to click on the very bottom of my selection preview right here and change it back to none. And this is how your image will typically look if you're doing the, if you've never changed anything in here. I prefer to use the grayscale selection preview because it just gives me a bigger version of the little preview box that's right here. But you can start out with it set like this so that you know where to sample. I'm going to click on just the bridge of her nose to start this process. And now you can see in this little small thumbnail that it's selected the bridge of her nose. That part's fine. But if you really want to see what areas have been selected, click on your selection preview, drop down and go down to grayscale. And now you've got a big version of it. And now I can actually work on here to get the areas that I want to be selected and the ones that I don't want to be not selected. Now, currently we have an eyedropper tool that works just like any selection tool does. If I click on a different area, like I'm going to click on the area that's right underneath her eyeball. So it's where we actually have a little bit of more shine, a highlight here. If I click on that, you'll see it changes everything. So like a normal selection tool, it does not build on the first one. It actually does everything. It changes everything. So if I go back to the bridge of her nose again, it changes everything back again here. So what I want to do is I don't want to keep changing my sample point. I want to actually add to my sample point. So once you click the first one, you change eyedroppers. And if you look at the three little eyedroppers that are underneath the save box, there's an eyedropper that has a plus right underneath it and one that has a minus right underneath it. I'm going to click on the one that is the plus. So what will happen now is it won't get rid of my original selection. It will simply add to it. So then I'm going to come over to this area that's right under her cheek, the same thing I had before. I'm going to click on that and you can see it's actually added to this and it's opened it up. Now I have a problem because I think the background it's also being picked up too much on this. So then you can actually go to your minus tool, the minus eyedropper, the third one over, click on that and come back over and click on your background and probably part of her shirt. And we can sort of bring these things back in again. You can use your fuzziness slider to also control how strong this happens or not. So I'm going to bring my fuzziness control down. What I'm really concerned about or just looking for primarily are the outlines of her face. And I feel like I've got a pretty good selection going here. I'm going to pop this up a little bit. And this is where I'm going to actually start to work on my file. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. It gives you a selection. We need to save this selection in order to work on it. So you go up to the select menu, down to save selection, and I'm just going to call this skin. And say OK. Command D to deselect. If you now go to the bottom of your channels palette, you can click on it and you can actually see what we have. And we can now work on this, which is what I want to do. This is not where I need it to actually be. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit a brush, the B key. I'm going to make this a medium hard brush, maybe a little bit better than medium hard, a 75% hard brush. For the blending mode in here, I'm going to change it to overlay because, again, I want it to respect the contrast that I've already got in here. And then I'm 100% opacity and 100% flow. And then I'm going to zoom into my image. So I want to discriminate between areas in here that I don't want to pick up the hair that's on this side, but I can make my brush a little bit larger and I can simply start painting in these areas right here to lift this stuff up. I'm going to avoid her eyelashes. That worked out pretty good. I'm going to hit this second and a third and a fourth time up in here just to get those areas up in there done. A little bit smaller of a brush. And kick in these areas right in here. Actually, the eyeshadow that's over the top of her eye, I want that to be sharpened. So I'm going to go back to this and simply just work on the skin. I'm going to get all of the stuff that's underneath here, and then I'm going to work my way down here. And I'm going to continue to work my way down here. Around her mouth, you want to actually keep her mouth dark. because you want that to be sharpened. And I'm going to go after hers on the other side here. You can be pretty loose and brutal with this mask. It doesn't need to be hyper perfect. If you get into an area like this and you know that you don't need to protect, and you're pretty good with your tablet, whatever, you can actually change this back to a normal brush, and that way you don't have to keep going over things over and over and over. Her neck down here is actually skin, even though it's in complete shadow. So that's the way that I would actually build this mask. And so I'm going to zip back out and do this pretty quick, just so we don't spend forever on it. You don't want to actually, you want to keep her nostrils dark, because again, you want those actually sharpened. I'm going to pick up all of this area in here, all of this in here, all of this over in here. And I'm feeling pretty good about that. And then again, just the rest of her neck. If you make a mistake on the side like I just did on this one right here, just hit your X key to get black and you can paint that one in. And then we actually also need to do black on all of this area that's in here. And then I'll be pretty brutal just around here, and I will actually go through all of the hair, all of the highlights. I would have gotten rid of that patch of skin that's on her forehead, but I don't need to do that part right now, so I'm not going to sharpen that area. Sorry about that. I am going to blacken her eyes. I want them all sharp. And I'm also going to blacken her lips. And then the rest of this down here, I'm going to just get rid of all of that. And double click on the hand to kick back out. I hit a mark right here on her forehead that shouldn't be, so X key, B key to get a brush, and just paint that with white. And this is going to be my sharpening mask. You can see it's pretty rough, but it'll do wonders for this image right now. However, this mask is inverted, because what I want to do is I'm going to do sharpening on this. But if I use this as the layer mask, then all of the areas that are black will not be sharpened, and all the areas that are not black will be sharpened. And I want the exact opposite of that. So Command I, just invert this. Now the skin will be protected and everything else will be sharpened. So I'm going to load this as a selection, hover over the skin channel, hold down your Command key and click to load it as a selection, and then come over to your sharpening layer and add it as a layer mask. And then we can actually do the sharpening. So I'm going to zoom in on this. And in the sharpening part right here, again, select your smart object, not the layer mask, but the smart object. Because that's what we're going to run the sharpening filter on. And then again, there's a million ways, a million sharpening versions that you can do on this. I'm just going to do a regular sharpening filter unsharp mask. So up to the filter menu, down to sharpen, down to unsharp mask. And you can really whack this thing pretty hard. Most people will actually take this too far. So for instance, you can drag your amount all the way up. I've got a radius of 1 and a threshold of 0 in here. And you can see that my image is actually very sharp. My skin tone is not sharp. If you say OK to this, and then turn this on and off, you'll see it's sharpening the area that's right around her eyes, it's sharpening her eyebrows, it's sharpening all of that. Now, at that 500%, you could say to yourself, wow, that is just too much. That is, you've way over sharpened this. The thing about sharpening is that you will never know how much sharpening you need until you actually do its final output. So is this too much sharpening for screen? In my opinion, yes, it is. Is this too much sharpening for a matte print, a print that's done on matte paper? It's probably not enough. The only way you'll ever know is you've got to print that thing out. Does that make sense, everyone? What's going on here? Okay, so for me, I feel like it's too strong for screen. So you can open this back up and actually back it off, or better yet, just drop the opacity of this while you're watching it, and you can bring it down. And so I'm going to bring mine down around 30%, and maybe pop that up a little bit more, 45%. That looks right for screen for me. Questions about this? You can close that one up. We don't need to save that guy. All right, so we've talked about sharpening, contrast, texture. Oh, targeting, hue, and saturation. Well, we got to find a good image for this. Hang on one sec. Let's go ahead and try, hang on, let me just see if there's something else in here that I think is going to work a little bit better. All right, let's go back to your assignment in session 10. So let's just go back to that. We'll work with a girl in the bathing suit. So if you go into your session 10 files, inside your student files, inside the assignment folder, inside the folder that's 071103 swim, inside that, the image that we're looking for is frame number 59. That's the one we were actually working with. So if you can open 59 up, it'll come into Camera Raw. We could try to color balance on this, probably on her suit. I'll see what it looks like. Again, there's a version of this image that's actually got a color card in it. I would have brought that in instead, but we'll just check and make sure, see how far we are actually off. So yeah, I clicked on the side. Do I like that? Not really. So I'm going to Command C that. We're just going to open it the way it is. So go ahead and open it up. So I want to actually pick her skin tone to control the color in here. The thing is that I may have parts of this other color somewhere else out in my image. So it's just a way to show you how to use a more targeted approach when you're using hue, hue saturation curves. So we're going to add a curve on top of this. So come down to the bottom of your layers palette. It's the circle that's half black and half white, and we're going to add a hue saturation to this. And when we do the hue saturation part on here, you can see that it starts out in the default. This is actually what it does is it looks at, these are just your RGB CMYK colors. There's no K in here, so it's RGB CMY. So that's the colors that are picked here. And then there's this universal hue, so it's like all of them combined. So if we did an adjustment on the saturation, it would affect all of these colors. If we instead picked just the reds and did a saturation adjustment on that, it would only pick the reds. However, you can do, this hue saturation is actually changed. You can click on this drop down menu here and you can come down and you can pick what they call prominent colors. And what that does is it actually analyzes your image now, and you can see the color swatches up here are completely different. These color swatches up here now are actually looking at your image and saying what colors are the real dominant players in this image, and they're giving them to you. So I'm going to pick the one that's right in the very middle, this sort of like darkish brown, or I mean sort of middle tone brown one. I'm going to click on that, and I want to know what colors are really being affected by this. So to find out what colors are really being affected by this, you take your saturation slider and you drag it all the way up, and you take your hue and you drag it all the way up. And you can see now that what I'm affecting here really is just primarily her skin tones. Now I do have some areas that are down here that are also being affected. The area underneath her boob on the left-hand side, that's also being changed. But if you take a look at the water, the area in the water, the purple that's in the water is not being affected. There is some green that's being shown in the water. So part of this is being impacted a little bit, but this just gives you a preview of what's really going to be changed. However, there's a way to be more precise about this, and I'm going to show you that trick right now. So we're going to undo all of this. If you go back up to the preset at the very top for your hue saturation, up to the very top to default, it'll go back to the original version of this. And instead, we are going to target these colors specifically ourselves. You can do it with the targeting adjustment tool, but you can also do it with these select color range tools. But you'll notice with the select color range tools, you don't have any, you can't pick them right now. They're grayed out. You've actually got to pick a color first in order to start this process. So I'm going to use the targeting adjustment tool up in the very top right-hand side, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to pick just the color of her skin. And when you do that, you'll actually see, you can't completely see what I'm looking to see. I've got to make my this whole part here bigger so that you can see all you need to. I needed to make my palette larger so that I could really see what color range is specifically being affected. So the color range, the thing that I'm talking about down here, does everybody have these two bars sitting right down here? Okay, so what these are telling you right now, we have not made any changes in this. If you take a look at these, at the sort of the graphic that exists between here, you've got a color bar on the top and you've got a color bar on the bottom, and they're exactly the same right now because we haven't made any changes. If you, for instance, take the hue slider up at the very top right now and drag it all the way to the right, you'll see that the bottom bar has actually changed in this area, this small area right here. It's actually moved the hue in this small little range area that we've got in here. What's really going on in this shift here, you'll notice that the top bar never changes. That's always your reference. But the bottom bar now is the remapping. So you can see all of the areas that were up in here that were in the red, which is where our skin tones are, have now been shifted over to this sort of like cyanic green. Again, if you shift this back to zero it back out, you'll see that just those colors in here are shifting. And if you double click on the little token that you use to move this, it'll zero it back out and these bars become identical again. But for us, we want to be more precise about what the range that we're really changing. So what is happening down here is if you take a look at the sort of the this graphic that's happening in between these two color bars, you'll see that in the very center there are two large, two sort of like completely upright, almost columns with a lighter gray area in between. What that's telling you is that any change that we make is going to impact the color range, this area that's right in here, 100%. It's a complete shift of color or saturation or lightness. Then once you leave these color bars and you start to move to the triangles at the end, that is a ramp down. So what's happening here is right where this column is right here is a one, and everything that's in between these two columns, it's a 100% change. But as you start to move from this column to this triangle, the impact of your change ramps down. And then by the time you get to the very point of the triangle, it cuts out. It's no longer going to be affecting anything. And the same thing happens on the other side as well. However, you can maneuver these things around. But first, I want to get a preview of what really is going to be affected. So I've got a color range that is selected. I'm going to grab my hue and drag it all the way up, and my saturation and drag it all the way up. And you can see the part in here that's gone nuclear is actually the part that's going to be changed. But I can move this around and fine tune it. So to move it around, if you click on the area that is right in the middle of that, between those two columns, you can click and slide this around and you can see I can actually impact. So now I'm actually grabbing more of her skin tone I'm not really affecting the part that that I don't see in the water. I've still got some that's happening in the water, but just by moving this thing up, I've selected more of her skin tone. Now, that's not the only change that you can make. You can actually grab one of these columns and you can narrow them down, or you can broaden them out. So I'm going to grab the column that's on the right hand side, and I'm going to click and I'm going to pull it in, and you'll see it's starting to narrow down the skin tone. I don't want to do that. I want to actually go in the opposite direction. But in the opposite direction, I'm not really picking up a whole lot more. So this thing is pretty good where it is. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I am going to see what happens when I move the column on the other side. I'm going to click on that and drag it to open this up. And you'll see it starts to open up. It's adding more to the water. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to actually do the opposite. I'm going to narrow this down. Command Z to undo that. I'm going to narrow this down to see if I can't get, yeah, it's just beginning to hit her skin tone a little bit. So that's basically the way, and you can control the fall off as well. So you can grab the little triangles that are in the end and you can actually narrow them down or extend them, and you can do the same thing on the other side. So in my case, the last thing to talk about is that if you want to completely subtract an area, you can use the plus and the minus eyedroppers. So I don't want this impacting the area that's right over here underneath her boob at all. So I'm going to click on the minus eyedropper, and I'm going to come over here and click on that area. And you can actually see it shifted. Look at how narrow it made my whole range. It like really shrank that guy in. So that's basically an extremely narrow range of this. It got rid of all the other stuff that's in the pool as well. So in some ways, this might be the better selection. We'll actually see. I'm going to double click on the hue to zero it back out, and I'm going to do the same thing on the saturation to zero it back out. Now in this case, now I've got an extremely narrow range that I'm affecting, and I can say, for instance, I want to desaturate just her skin. I can start to pull this back down a little bit, and you'll see it's not impacting the saturation of the color that's in the water at all. It's only impacting the tone that's actually, her skin tone here. And personally, I think this is a much more attractive skin tone. To see what you're really doing, you can use your highlight. You can turn this on and off, and you can see you're pulling a lot of that real super red saturation out of here. If we zoom into this, again, it's extremely targeted. It's only impacting that area of her skin. You can also shift the color a little bit if you feel like it's slightly too red. We can actually pop this up a little bit. So it's extremely targeting adjustment. But doing this trick where you really crank the saturation and the hue all the way up to really give you a preview of the area that's going to be impacted is, it's really, really, really invaluable to do this with. Questions about this? Okay, I've got 302. Let's do another hard 10 really quickly. We are going to do one composite when you guys get back, maybe two. That'll be it. And then we're going to call it an early day. You guys have been absolute champs for showing up today. I want to give you again, we're playing catch up and going through these things. I do want to do another composite with you because, again, I feel like that doing composites together in person actually gives you the skill, how to really look at a composite and think about it and all that kind of stuff. Although I know some of you are leaving at 3:30. Is that still the case? Do you have to split, Allie? Yeah. Okay, so, all right, then vote, guys, really quickly. If that's the case, I say we just soldier on, do the composite right now for the next 25 minutes and call it a day. You up for that? All right, then let's do that instead. You can close this guy up. Say what?
I was going to leave right now.
Oh, you can leave right now, but everybody else is going to want to get out here in a half hour, so don't worry, you can split. Did I end up getting back to you about, so I think the sensor that's inside that printer that detects where the paper is either dirty or it's been covered up or something. And the first solution is that we got to blow that thing out with air. Okay. When are you going back into print?
I get back on Monday.
Oh, so, but not before then, right? Then let's touch bases then, and I've got all the tricks that we can look at to get that to work. But I want you to get it to work sooner than later.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so for everyone else, if you can go to our server. And inside our server, go to class projects, go to Engelhard. Remember we did a comps for class. So there's one in here. There's 3 of them in here. And I want to just check. I think Emily's is the one we actually did. Yeah, that's the one we did. So let's look at Gretchen's really quickly. I don't remember any of these, to be honest with you. That's not going to, let me check at Pablo's really quickly. Yeah, let's look at Pablo's instead. So, because Gretchen, there wasn't that much that was actually off on yours. And it's weird. I was trying to scale it, and it got to be really hard to scale. So, because there's nothing, the ground slopes down. So trying to find a horizon line on that was like, you can, but then there's conflicting horizon. It was, yeah, it's, but it was an interesting call. So anyway, if you guys can open up the Pablo one, this will go quicker than not. So did everybody find this one? It's this one right here. Are we good on this? All right. Well, what's wrong with this? I mean, when you just look at it, is there anything wrong with it? Yeah, it's too light. There's a lot of issues that I'm finding with this, whatever. But the first one is the lighting on the person. Look at the light that's on the beach, right? Isn't that a big top heavy overhead, overcast, cloudy light day? And then look at the light on her. It's a direct side light that's actually coming on her. So it's the wrong girl, flat out. So we're going to fix that. We are going to turn her off. To get to the right girl, again, go to your session number 9. That's where those figures are. And in number 9, in your student folder, inside your assignment folder, are the 2 figures. You want to select composite body number 2, not composite body number 1, because composite number 2 is largely a flat overhead light. So that's what you want to open up into Photoshop, and that's what we're going to composite into our scene right now. So with this done, I'm going to grab this composite layer, drag it on top of the beach, hold down the shift key and let go, and it comes in a monster scale. And then I'm going to close up the composite because I've got everything I need. The composite part is where it needs to be. Mine came in underneath the original figure, the figure of the girl. I don't want to get rid of the girl in yellow because I want to be able to go back and forth between the two. But I'm going to drag the new girl, the girl in black, up to the very top of my screen right here. And this is where I'm going to start. So is everybody who wants to do this with me? Okay. Well, first off, we need to scale the girl down. She's actually scaled too big in this. But I have an issue with part of that. And the issue with part of that is going to be, I'm going to turn her off really quickly. I'm going to look at the scene that he's actually got going on in here. And I'm also going to look at the size of the image. So this is Pablo's image. So I've just turned my composite temporarily off, up to the image menu, down to image size. And I'm going to take a look at this. I want to see what it is in pixels. So I'm just going to click on this, and you can see this is an extremely small image. So I've got a problem with that to begin with because I'm going to have a resolution mismatch. The resolution of the girl, let's open up the girl one more time just to see. So I'm going to hit cancel out of here. Just come up to your file menu, down to open recent, and then you're actually going to open that composite body number 2 again just to see how big it is. And then up to the image menu, down to image size, and again, pixel count. and you can see that this is closer. The image that Pablo had is about half the size of this. So it's a mismatch, and I need to fix that part first. So I'm going to leave this, I'm going to hit cancel here. I'm going to leave the girl open. I'm going to go back to Pablo's image, and I'm going to throw away the composite that's on there right now. And then I'm going to do a merge stamp version of all of this, because there's stuff that he's got down in here. You know, I take that back. I'm not going to keep the original Pablo in here. I'm going to get rid of all of this other stuff. So up to the very top. And we're just going to get rid of the figure, his adjustment layers, all of that stuff in here. So I simply have a background. That's all I want to have in here. I am going to duplicate this background, though, by Command J, just so I keep a virgin in here. And then I'm going to make this whole image bigger. To do that, come up to your image menu, down to, you can try generative upscale. This is new, relatively new. When you do the generative upscale, a window will open up, and you'll have a drop-down menu here for models. Currently, right now, the college is not paying for the partner models. So if you click on Topaz, either Gigapixel or Topaz Bloom, the difference in these two is the Gigapixel tries to keep as much of the original image as possible. The Topaz Bloom will actually invent stuff for your image, so it'll like add trees or possibly add waves, or it's considered more creative. But at any rate, if you click on Topaz Gigapixel, and we're just going to leave the upscale at ×2 and click on it, you'll get this warning saying that the administrator is not allowing access to this. I'm hoping to get this resolved before this class is over this semester, so that we can actually explore this, but for right now we can't. However, the Photoshop, the Adobe upscalers are in there. So back up to the image menu, down to generative upscale, and then click on Firefly up at the very top. That is Adobe's. We will do a 2-pixel upscale, and it'll say right here that your dimensions are going to be 1500 by 2250 pixels. I'm going to go to a 4x and see how big that is. So this is a 3000 by 4000. I think it's a better fit for the image that I'm actually going to bring into here. Remember, this one was like a 2000 by 3000 for the figure. So I'm going to go ahead and say upscale for this. I'm going to double click on the hand, and now my image is, if I look at image size and its pixel count, it's 3000 by 4500. So now when I actually bring my girl into this, so I'm going to click on her and drag her over onto this, hold down the shift key and bring it in. You can see she's much more to scale. There's much less disparity in this. So from a resolution perspective, this is probably going to work out better for me. So I'm going to go back to Pablo's original one. I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm just going to park it off to the side. And this is basically where I'm working with right now. So I can get rid of the figure that is by itself. I've already brought it into my composite. And so this is basically where I'm going to start to try to get this part put together. Now, the thing that you can remember, or should remember about all of this, is that when I started this process, the girl was actually color balanced. I'm not certain that this background is actually color balanced. So to find out, I'm going to come over here to my background here. There's a layer mask that's on it. I'm going to get rid of this layer mask. I don't really need that layer mask right now. I'm just going to delete it. I don't need to apply it. But I am going to turn this thing into a smart object because I want to run a camera raw filter on it. And it's not, it didn't get brought in as a raw smart object. So I'm just going to be doing this from scratch. So I'm going to click on, again, the upscale layer of this, up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects and Convert to Smart Object. And then I'm going to run the Camera Raw filter on it. So up to the Filter menu, down to Camera Raw Filter. And when this opens up, the first thing I want to do is color balance this. So I'm going to zoom into this and see if I can't find something in here that I feel like should be neutral gray. Typically, I look for garbage on the beach. If there's like, a piece of paper, a Kleenex, or something on the beach, it doesn't look like there is anything on the beach. So I'm going to zip back out, and I'm going to zoom into the area where the wave is. So the waves are not technically always going to be a neutral color, but this foamy part right here is probably a good. We'll try it and just see what it looks like. So over to the color palette and grab the color picker, the little eyedropper tool, come over and click on the wave, and you can see it put in some red. It actually lifted things up a little bit. So if you want to see your before and after, that's where the button right on the next to the lower part. Just look at my screen. Next to the palettes on between the palette and the image, the button for the left is a before and after. If you click on this, it'll show you both before and after. And I like the additional warmth in here. It feels a little bit better to me, so I'm going to go with that guy. And I don't need to keep any of that going on before, so I'm just going to cycle through all of these. So this is now my after. The next thing I'm going to do is, and it's something that I see people don't do a whole lot, and you should be doing this. Go up to the very top of your edit menu. There's an auto button up at the very top. What this is going to do is it's going to try to figure out optimal exposure, contrast, all that kind of stuff for your image. So I'm going to click on that and to see what is actually happening here. And again, I've still got a before and after here. So I'm going to try to get rid of this settings all along here. I'm going to cancel out of this and go right back into it, because I can't get the, again, I never use before and after in here, but so I couldn't get rid of it. So I just quit it and came back in. So anyway, color balance and then the auto button on everything. And it's pumped in some more contrast, and I like that part of it all. This actually seems to me to be moving closer. So it's not always about moving the figure to fit your background. It's also thinking about moving your background to fit your figure. So this has now been white balance, and at least it's brought in a little bit more contrast. So I'm closer. I can start with this now. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Then I think the girl is way too big in this scene here. So I'm going to come up here to the top, and we're just going to transform her. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I do have a horizon line in here. The horizon line, you can spot it. It's actually on the beach, and ironically, it's there. It's about the horizon line of the girl as well. The horizon line of the girl is roughly right about where her crotch is, and so this one's actually really pretty close here. So I can transform this in perspective using this. So again, the anchor point is almost exactly on the horizon line right here. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Option key both, and then click on the lower handle here and just start to push her back into space. And then I'm going to move her off to, this actually just moved my anchor point. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm just going to move her slightly over to the left. So this is where I'm going to actually start with this, and I'll go ahead and say okay to that. Then I'm going to zoom in on this, and you remember we actually had this part of her foot was designed to actually be on a rock. There's nothing to explain why that foot is higher up in the air than this foot that's over here. So I'm going to click and drag a guideline down to put underneath this foot. This foot actually needs to be on the same line as this one. So I'm going to hit Command T again to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to grab the anchor point that's up near her crotch and bring it down and put it right at her toe. So now any transforming that I do, her toe will be anchored, her right side. The left side will actually move. So then I'm going to come over to the left side, put your cursor outside the transform box so that you get the double-headed arrow, and then you can simply click and rotate her down to where her other foot is actually more flat on the ground. And then say okay to that. To get rid of your guideline, come up to the view menu and come down to guides and hit clear guides, and it's gone. And now if you double click on this, you can see she's more firmly anchored. If you hit Command Z to undo, I take it back, that's not going to be Command Z. You're going to have to go back in your history, back to free transform. and then down to free transform again. And you can just see in terms of doing all of this, she's far more anchored. It makes more sense where she is. She's anchored into the ground. So again, I'm going to get rid of this guideline, view menu, guides, and we are going to clear guides. So then I'm going to run my check layers on this, my check layers action. So go to your actions palette. You need to find your check layers action. I've got 100,000 of them. This is mine right here. Make sure that you're clicking the group, not anything inside the group, but the group, the parent of this, and go ahead and run the action. It makes everything pretty psychedelic. So again, the check color is the one that always turns on. So I'm going to come over to my layers palette and uncheck the check color one, and I'm going to start with luminosity. So I'm going to click on luminosity, and you can see when you do that, the luminosity check layer, the girl does not fit this image at all. She is way too dark and way too contrasty. Things would be considerably lighter for her. So she is a smart object, so the first thing I need to do is reduce the contrast. The shadows are way too deep. So to do that, you do not want to use a curve. You want to actually use the shadow highlight adjustment. So click on the girl, the composite body layer, up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to shadows and highlights. So again, up to the image menu, adjustments, shadows and highlights, and it'll actually, by definition, it opens up. If you take a look at your control box, it only opens the shadows. I think that this is a pretty good move in all of this. So I'm going to say okay to this because I've also got, it's not just my shadows here, it's also my overall exposure part in here. So I'm going to start with this and say okay, but I'm not light enough yet. So I'm going to use another filter on this that will also function as a smart filter. You could put a curve on this to actually lift all of this, but I think a better way of doing this is to use the exposure control in the camera raw filter. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to come up to the filter, down to camera raw. It's going to open up, and unfortunately now we can't see it in the context of the image, but I'm just going to then go through iterations of it. I'm going to add a full stop exposure to this. So click on the slider, come over, and we're going to add one full stop and say okay. Now I look at that and that's clearly too bright. So I'm going to double click on my camera raw filter again and drag that down to a half a stop more instead of a full stop more and say okay. And this is beginning to get closer to the way I feel like this thing probably should be. I'm going to turn off my luminosity check layer. And then I'm also going to, you'll see that both of these smart filters, the camera raw filter, which is my exposure adjustment, if I click on that and turn that on and off, you can see it's lightening things up. I think that that part's actually correct. I'm going to do my shadows and highlights. I'm going to do that on and off. And this, I think, is also possibly correct. I think that there are other issues in here. She's far too saturated for being in this space, but that's we'll tackle that whole part next. Before I do any of that, though, I need to open up the rest of her shirt, the rest of her jacket, because that part, it's got to match everything else that's in here. This is an incredibly flat light, so to fix that, make sure that you have the body selected. We are going to add a curve on top of this. I'm going to then clip the curve to the body, so hover between the curve and the composite body layer, hold down your option key and click, and it will actually clip it so that this curve only impacts the girl and doesn't impact anything else. I'm going to then grab my shadow point slider, the shadow point that's at the bottom of my curve in the properties panel, and I'm going to drag it up. And we don't need to worry about overdoing this. This will actually work out fine because I can always come in and adjust this later. Then I do have a layer mask that's on here. So the layer mask is white, so it's impacting the entire girl. I only want it to impact the areas that are in too deep a shadow. So I'm going to invert this mask, Command I, and then I'm going to go to my tablet. I'm going to zoom in a little bit tighter so that I can really work on this. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make sure it is a completely soft brush. We've done this a number of times on this girl, so I'm not going to spend hours doing it. I'm going to bring my flow on my brush down to like a 4 or 5 or 3%. Hit the D key to default my foreground and background colors to black and white. White is my foreground color, so while I'm painting white on this layer mask, it will actually show through, and then I'm just going to start scrubbing in this area that is where the shadows are too dark. So underneath her neck, underneath her armpits, underneath her arm a little bit more. Her crotch needs to lift, the area that's by her shoulders. All of this needs to simply be lifted to make more sense. And this now actually looks much better to me. I'm going to turn this on and off. I did not change the blending mode of this, and I should have done that. So I'm going to click on the drop-down menu for my blending mode of this layer because I don't want to change anything else. I just want to change the luminosity. So I'm going to click on luminosity so it doesn't alter the color of this at all. I'm going to double-click on the hand and kick back out. I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer, but we'll see. So the next thing I'm going to go after is my color. I usually do color before saturation. So I'm going to click on the color group to turn it on. You need to make sure though that you've actually got both things on in the color group. So if you actually open up the color group, you'll see that there is a hue saturation layer, but there's also a color check layer. The way my action works is the color check layer is not on. So I'm going to click on that to turn it on. And then, yeah, and so this is actually my color check layer now. And what it's doing in here is it's actually looking at this image and it's exaggerating all the colors so that we can see the color differences. And you can see the beach itself is relatively warm. The girl's face is pretty warm as well, but her clothes are way too blue in here to match this scene. So to fix that, I'm going to go back down to the curve that I put on here to open up the shadows of her jacket. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to add a hue saturation layer. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to add a color balance layer on top of this. So again, the circle that's half black and half white, click on that, and we are going to add a color balance. And then in the color balance, you're going to change the blending mode from normal down to color. And then you're also going to hover between both the color adjustment, the color balance adjustment layer and the curve right underneath it. Hold down your option key so that you can clip this as well. So again, the reason I'm clipping these layers is so that they only impact the girl, the figure, and not the background or not anything else. So you can see right off the bat that I need to add orange. So orange is a combination of yellow and red. So I know that I need to bump both of those. So I'm going to start with the yellow slider. And again, I'm going to take it towards the left to increase the yellow. And you'll see she starts to turn kind of green. Don't take it any further. I've still got a little bit of room to play. But then I'm going to grab the red slider and I'm going to actually push it to the red. Again, I'm trying to build in more orange in here. It's not a lot of red. You don't want to hit that with a whole lot of red. So actually, I'm going to go to my arrow keys to tap in the red. So if you select the red value and use your arrow keys, you can actually type it in slowly. And I want to type it in until I'm getting orange, but I don't want it turning red. It looks like I need a slight little bit more of yellow in here. And so this is basically where I'm going to go with in this guy. Maybe just a slight touch more red in here as well. So the red's a really tricky adjustment, but that feels a little bit better to me. It's a little bit more orange in here. It's matching the background a little bit more. If you want to see the difference in what you've done, turn your eyeball of this on and off, and you can see we're seriously pushing it in the direction of her of the background. So I'm going to turn off my color check layer. I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit more and take a look at it again. So in my, I'm going to keep going down the curve that I just put on here. I'm going to turn it on and off, and she feels, yeah, it's way too cold to be in this space. But look at the difference that this makes. That's actually becoming a really nice match. So then finally, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to turn on my saturation check layer. And you can see the only thing that's in here, the beach has got some saturation in it. Her face has got a little bit of saturation in it. It's close, but I feel like her hair, I feel like I could bring the saturation slightly down on her face just a little bit to more match the scene. So again, I'm going to scroll down to the color balance layer that I was working on, select it, because I need to add another adjustment layer above this, a hue saturation adjustment layer. And with the hue saturation adjustment layer added, I'm going to hold down the Option key to clip it. Sorry, that did not clip it. That did. Change the blending mode down to saturation so that that's the only thing we're changing. And then I'm going to make sure nothing else just happened. Nope. I'm just going to pull the saturation slightly down. You'll see the only thing it really changes is her face. And it looks like it's a little closer in terms of luminosity to the beach. So I got a -9 if you want the same value that I've got. We'll see what it looks like. I'm going to turn off my saturation check layer. So this is where I'm beginning to work here for this figure. Now the final two things that I'm going to do here, first is I'm going to do a quick set of shadows for her. She really doesn't have that many because it's a really soft area in this whole beachy part. So to do that, I'm going to come down to where the figure is. I've got to go down to the background. I'm going to click on the background because, again, you want your shadows to be on top of the background but underneath the girl. So I'm just going to select my background. I'm going to add a blank layer on top of this. I'm going to call this Shadow 1. I'm going to hit the G key to get a gradient tool. I'm going to hit the D key to get my foreground and background colors to default to black and white. G key is still selected. I still do have a gradient. Up in your options bar, click on the drop-down menu. You do not want a regular gradient. You want a classic gradient. And then in the icon that's right to the right of that, the type of gradient we want, if you click this to open it up and then open up the basics group, you want to pick the one in the middle, which is foreground to transparency. If yours is white to transparency, it's only because white is your foreground color. As soon as we get this thing set up correctly, you can you can make black your foreground color. And then finally, the type of gradient we want is the second icon from the left. It is the circular gradient. Then I'm going to zoom in to close to her feet. I'm going to start on the one that's on the left hand or the right hand side. I'm just going to, again, working on my shadow number 1 layer, click and drag down. It gives me a gradient. Command T to bring up a transform dialog box. I want to transform I want to flatten this, but I don't want to just drag the top down. I want to drag the top down, but also the bottom up. So to do that, you hold down the Option key so that when you pick one of the control handles, it does the one on the other side as well. I'm going to flatten this really quite a bit, and I'm also going to drive it in. I'm going to make it much less wide. And then I'm simply going to click and I'm going to bring this underneath her foot. Now this is going to be a contact shadow. Her foot is slightly twisted, so I'm also going to put a slight twist in the shadow just so that it's right underneath her foot. And then for me it gets to be really hard to see where this is, so I'm going to hit Command H to hide that, but it is still selected. Now I can hit use my up and down arrow keys to actually tap this to bring this up so it's right underneath her foot. And this one is actually in pretty good space right now. So I'm going to hit Command H again to bring back my transform control handles and then just click the check mark to go ahead and accept that. Now I've got a little bit of shadow on both sides of her feet and there's nothing that would explain that. There's nothing that would be causing those shadows. You have to get rid of them. So you hit the E key to get the eraser tool, make it much smaller. And I'm just going to scrub away the shadow that's on this side right here and the one that's on this side right here. And this is a contact shadow, and it's perfect. I'm going to do another blank layer, call it Shadow 2. Hit the G key to get the gradient tool, click and drag out. Command T to transform it. hold down the Option key to flatten this thing. In this case, I'm going to drag it out a little bit longer. I've also got to rotate it a little bit. You want the contact part, the darker part, to be right under her foot, but you do want a slight fade that goes out underneath the rest of her foot. So I'm leaving my anchor point right in the middle. I'm going to actually drag this other part out a little bit further, because there would be a little bit of shadow that's going on there. Nowhere near as dark as the contact shadow that's underneath her. I'm going to rotate that a little bit more. And I'm feeling pretty good about this one, the way it is right now. So I'm going to click and say OK. But again, there's nothing that explains this shadow that's in the front of her foot. So the E key to get the eraser tool and get rid of all of this part that's in the front of her foot. You can also clean up the line that's right underneath her just a little bit. And then finally, there's too much shadow that's in the back. That would never be, and it would never be on the other side as well. Now, I feel like this one is maybe a slightly too dark. I'm going to lift it again. I'm just going to go to my, hit the V key and go to my arrow keys and tap it up to make it a little bit more narrow, and that feels considerably better. I'm going to double click on the hand, and this is basically where I'm at right now. But the one last trick that I'm going to show you guys is that it's a foggy day, and she is not foggy here at all. So we need to create a sense of fog on her. So the way I'm going to do that, and to be honest with you, this is the first time I've tried this because I haven't seen this image until right now. I'm going to go back up to my very top to the area, to the control, the adjustment layers that I've got that are actually being clipped to her, because I need to, this next thing that I need to do, I also needs to be clipped to her. So I'm going to go up. The last thing that I did was the hue saturation when I dropped the saturation on her face. I'm going to add a blank layer on top of this. So just click on add blank layer. I am going to clip it to the girl, so I'm going to hover in between the layer number 1 and the adjustment layer underneath it, hold down the Option key and click. Again, we're just doing this over and over and over again. So this is now clipped to the girl, and then I'm going to fill this with white. White is my background color right now, so Command Delete will fill it with white, and you can see she is now completely white. And then I'm simply going to drop my opacity on this to basically ghost her out in this. And double click on the hand. So I'm feeling like this is a little too much. If you take a look at the area that's the beach right here, there's a lot more haze that's in the background. There's really very little that's on her. So I'm really going to bring this opacity of this part down just a little bit. And then in looking at this still, I feel like she is still a little bit too contrasty. So I am going to go back to my adjustment layer to the shadows and highlights. I'm going to double click on shadows and highlights to open it back up. And I am going to boost the shadows up a little bit more to open them. It's not affecting a lot. And then the highlights, if you use the highlight slider, you can do this, but the highlights will bring it down. It's just the opposite of what you want to do. So again, it's trying to flatten the image out, but I don't feel like that's really helping me a lot. And I also feel like that boost in the shadows is a little bit too much. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that and double click the hand. So this is basically where I am at in this regard. If we actually open up Pablo's original one and double click the hand and go back in history to what it looked like when he first opened it. That's the difference. Questions about this? We good? That's it, guys. Unless there's questions or anything else you want to talk about. Everybody have big plans for tomorrow or the next day? Is anybody going anywhere? I'm not either. I have family coming in town. I don't, anyway. Yes?
I'm going to work.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Work on Thanksgiving? No, not Thanksgiving.
I used to, I was a cook for years, and you work every holiday. Yeah, it's because they're big. Yeah, anyway. All right, guys, that's it. Have a great. Do take some time off. I hope. Please don't work on your final projects or anything for the whole time. Do a little bit, but also take some time off. Recharge the recharge the batteries.